Words have more power than you think. They're not just a way to communicate, but a tool you can use to push back against anyone trying to control your life. Today, I'm going to share specific phrases and practical ways to speak that will make any narcissist think twice before bothering you again. This isn't about arguing or getting revenge. It's about standing up for yourself, protecting your peace, and living life on your own terms. I've been in the situations you might be facing right now. I've dealt with people who turned every conversation into a way to manipulate me, leaving me feeling stuck and drained. There was a time I worked with someone who always had to be the center of attention, constantly interrupting me in meetings, criticizing me in front of others, and making me question whether I was doing something wrong. And then there were family gatherings where a relative would turn every story into an opportunity to blame or brag. Through all those experiences, I realized something important. You don't need to argue or beg to break free. You just need to know what to say and how to say it so they can't keep playing their games. I'm here to show you exactly how to do that. Narcissists show up everywhere, at work, in families, in relationships you once thought were safe. They're the ones who try to make you feel small so they can feel big. I once heard a friend talk about her ex. He would constantly text, call, and blame her for everything that went wrong just to pull her back into his toxic cycle. But today, we're changing that. You're going to learn how to say the things that stop them in their tracks, not by yelling or letting your emotions take over, but by staying calm and in control. We're going to walk through this step by step. I'll help you understand who narcissists really are, why your words can shift the way they treat you, and the specific phrases, tested in real-life situations, that you can use to protect yourself. This isn't just about dealing with them, this is about reclaiming your voice, standing in your truth, and making sure no one else gets to control or hurt you ever again. Let's get started, because you deserve that. Before you know what to say, you need to understand who narcissists really are and what drives their behavior. They are not as confident as they try to appear. In fact, they're often deeply insecure, and they hide that by controlling others, manipulating situations, and constantly trying to position themselves above you. Narcissists feed off your attention and reactions to feel important. They don't care about your feelings, not because they're intentionally trying to hurt you, but because they simply lack the ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes. When you're sad, when you're angry, when you try to explain something to them, they don't see it as your pain. They see it as a chance to pull you deeper into their orbit. That's why they're always pushing you to react. They want you to argue, to defend yourself, to show them that their words still have power over you. Think about that coworker who constantly brags about their achievements while downplaying yours. I once worked with someone like that. He'd stand up in meetings and talk about everything he had done, never once mentioning the late nights I stayed behind to help. It wasn't because he was confident. It was because he needed everyone to see him as the best, and he didn't care if it made me feel invisible. Or think about that family member who turns every conversation into a chance to criticize or show off. I had a friend who told me about her mother, who would silence everyone at the dinner table just to talk about her own successes, even if it meant putting others down. They don't care about truth. They care about how they look in front of others. They don't care how you feel. They just want you to react so they can feel in control again. I remember a time I tried to have an honest conversation with a narcissist. I opened up about how hurt I was by something they said. I thought that if I was sincere, they would understand. But instead, they smiled, twisted the story around, and made me feel like I was the problem for feeling hurt in the first place. That's when I realized you can't count on them to change or understand. They don't operate that way. But here's the important part. You can change how they affect you. They only have power because you give them the opportunity to have it when you react, when you argue, when you let them pull you into their world. But once you truly understand who they are, you can stop giving them what they want. You don't need to win an argument. You just need to stop playing their game. Understanding this is the first step toward taking your power back. Not by changing them, but by changing the way you deal with them. Your words can do more than just communicate. They can completely change the way a narcissist treats you. What you say and how you say it determines whether they'll keep coming at you or back off because they've run out of ways to push your buttons. This isn't about shouting louder than them or arguing until you're exhausted. It's about using your words to protect yourself and making it clear that you're not someone they can control. The most important rule is this: don't let your emotions drive your words. Narcissists feed off your emotions. When you're angry, when you're upset, when you try to explain yourself hoping they'll understand, you're giving them exactly what they want. I've been there. I once stood in front of a narcissist and tried to explain why I was hurt by something they did. I thought if I was clear enough they'd stop, but they didn't. They twisted my words, made me feel like I was the one at fault, and dragged the conversation into a draining spiral. That's when I learned emotions are their weapon of control. When you keep your voice calm, when you don't let them see you flinch, you take away the fuel they rely on. Think of it like talking to a stranger in a business transaction. No emotions, just clarity and directness. When your ex calls you late at night, trying to blame you for everything that went wrong, don't argue, don't explain, just say, "I'm not interested," and hang up. They won't know what to do next, because you just cut off the emotional fuel they need to suck you back in. I've done this before. Once an acquaintance called me just to complain and point fingers, and I simply said, "I don't care," and ended the call. They tried calling back a few times, but when I didn't answer, they eventually stopped. That's the power of staying calm. Why does saying less work so well? Because narcissists want you to say more. They want you to explain, to defend, to give them opportunities to twist the story their way. They're prepared for a long, drawn-out argument where they can wear you down and make you feel defeated. But when your responses are short, when you simply say no or "I'm not available," you throw them off. They don't know how to respond without enough material to keep attacking. I've dealt with people who constantly tried to bait me into fights, throwing out provocations, waiting for me to bite. Instead of engaging, I'd say, "I'm not available," and walk away. They stumbled, tried a few more lines, but eventually gave up because I wasn't giving them anything to latch onto. How you speak matters just as much. You don't need to be loud or aggressive. In fact, a calm, steady voice is far more powerful. When you speak without emotion, you show them that you're not affected by what they say or do. I remember once saying no to a narcissist. My tone wasn't raised, it didn't shake, it was just clear and firm. They looked at me, trying to provoke a reaction, but when I didn't say anything else. Your words don't need to be complicated, they just need to show that you're in control of yourself, and they can't shake that. Words are how you take your power back, not by fighting them, but by refusing to step into their world. You don't have to prove you're right or prove they're wrong, you just need to show them they can't drag you in. And when you do that, you'll notice they slowly lose interest, not because they've changed, but because you have changed the way you deal with them. Now we're getting to the most important part, the exact phrases you can use to make a narcissist think twice before ever trying to mess with you again. These aren't random words or things you just throw out to get attention. These are practical tools tested in high-pressure situations, in moments of manipulation, in the days when I and so many others had to find a way to protect ourselves from the weight of a narcissist control. These phrases don't just help you set boundaries immediately, they send a powerful message. You're no longer someone they can use. You're no longer a source of attention or emotional energy they crave to keep playing their games. Below are 5 of the most powerful phrases, along with a detailed breakdown of how they work, why they make narcissists stop in their tracks, and the lasting impact they can have in protecting your peace and freedom. 1. No. No is the shortest yet most powerful phrase you can use, just one word, but it carries the weight of an unshakable boundary. When you say no in a calm, firm tone, you're making it crystal clear that you have limits, and the narcissist is not allowed to cross them. What makes this word so effective is its simplicity. It doesn't open the door to arguments, it doesn't leave room for manipulation, and it shuts down any attempt to drag you into a conversation you don't want to have. Narcissists rely on your reaction to keep going. They want you to explain why, to justify yourself, to give them something they can push back on and turn into a longer game. But when you simply say no and stop there, you completely cut off the energy supply they need. They're left confused, with nothing to latch onto, and that throws them off balance. Think about a work situation. A coworker constantly asks you to take on tasks that they should be handling themselves, like finishing a report or dealing with a client call they don't want to do. I've been in that situation. A colleague used to ask if I could stay late to do his work, speaking in a tone that made it sound like I owed him something. The first time I tried to explain that I was busy, but he started arguing, saying I wasn't being a team player. The next time I changed my approach, I simply said, no. Nothing more. I looked him in the eye and stayed silent. He paused, tried to push back with, why not? But I didn't respond. Eventually he walked away and never brought it up again. Another time I used no with an acquaintance who kept asking me to help fix their car, even though I clearly didn't have the time. I said no and stayed quiet. They fumbled for a moment, then moved on and asked someone else. The long-term power of no lies in the fact that it teaches narcissists that you're not someone they can keep targeting. They need you to give in or at least react, so they have an opening to manipulate you. When you refuse to do either, you become a target that's simply not worth the effort. Every time you say no with confidence, you reinforce your boundaries, and they slowly learn that bothering you gets them nowhere. They walk away not because they suddenly respect you, but because they see that you're no longer giving them what they need to play their control game. 2. I don't have time for this. This phrase is a clear statement that you're not willing to waste your time or energy on a narcissist's games, and that's something they can't stand. They want to pull you into endless arguments and never-ending drama because that's how they keep you under their control and keep your attention on them. But when you say, I don't have time for this, you're not just refusing to engage, you're making it clear that your life is more valuable than whatever they're trying to drag you into. This hits their ego hard because they need to feel like they're the center of everything, and you've just shown them they're not important enough to take up your time. The power of this phrase lies in how it puts you in the position of control. You decide what's worth your energy, and they're not on that list. I used this phrase during a family gathering once. A relative started criticizing how I spent my money, trying to pull me into an argument just to become the center of attention. The first time, I tried to explain, but it only made things worse. They kept talking, escalating it into a full-blown debate. The next time I changed my response, I said, I don't have time for this, in an even, calm tone, stood up and walked out. They shouted a few more things trying to get me to come back, but I didn't. After a few times of doing that, they stopped targeting me because I wasn't giving them the chance to keep their drama going. Another time, it was with an old friend. He kept calling just to complain about his life, expecting me to sit and listen for hours. I said, I don't have time for this, and hung up. He called back a few times, but when I didn't answer, he eventually stopped. The long-term value of this phrase is that it makes narcissists realize you're not someone they can rely on to keep fueling their drama. They need your participation to feel important. When you clearly state that your time is too valuable for their games, you take away their incentive to keep bothering you. Use this phrase consistently, combined with action, like walking away or cutting the conversation short, and you send a powerful message. You're not an audience for their performance. Eventually, they give up, not because they've changed, but because they've learned that targeting you brings them no reward. You've become someone not worth the effort. 3. That's not my problem. This phrase is a powerful way to shift responsibility back where it belongs, to the narcissist, and that's something they simply can't handle. Narcissists often try to make you feel guilty, to make you believe it's your job to fix the mess they've created or take responsibility for their emotions. It's one of their key control tactics. But when you say, that's not my problem, you're making it clear that you are not responsible for fixing what they've caused, and you're not going to let them dump their obligations on you. The power of this phrase lies in how it disrupts their blame game. They want you to feel like it's your burden, but you've just refused to carry it. I once dealt with someone who tried to blame me for their own failures. They said that if I had helped more, they wouldn't have failed on a personal project. The first time, I tried to explain that it wasn't my responsibility, but they came back at me accusing me of being selfish. The next time, I took a different approach. I calmly said, "That's not my problem," with no emotion in my voice. They were stunned, tried to keep talking, tried to rope me in again, but I didn't respond. Eventually, they stopped bringing it up and never came to me with demands again. Another time, I used this phrase with a family member who constantly complained that I didn't care enough about them. I said, "That's not my problem," and stayed silent. They were angry at first, but eventually they stopped trying to pull me into their pity party. The long-term value of "that's not my problem" is that it clearly shows you're not someone they can rely on to make them feel better about themselves or to fix their issues. Narcissists need you to carry their load so they can keep manipulating from a distance, but when you shut that down with this phrase, you take away their reason to target you. They want you to feel guilty so they can keep you in their control, but when you stand firm and make it clear that their problems have nothing to do with you, they realize there's nothing to gain from bothering you. Use this phrase consistently and you become someone they simply can't use. They'll move on because you're no longer the emotional resource they depend on to keep their game going. 4. I understand, but I don't agree. This phrase is a smart way to stand your ground without getting pulled into an argument, and that's exactly what leaves a narcissist feeling powerless. They want you to agree with them, to bow to their opinions and perspectives so they can feel like they've won and that they're in control. But when you say, "I understand, but I don't agree," you're acknowledging that you've heard them without giving in. You're holding your position firmly without giving them an opening to pull you into a long, draining debate. The power of this phrase lies in its perfect balance. It shows that you're not being manipulated by their pressure, and you don't need their approval to feel secure in your stance. They can't keep arguing when you've closed the door to it. I use this phrase with an acquaintance who always tried to push their way of thinking on me. They insisted I should change the way I work to fit their ideas, and when I refused, they started criticizing me. The first time I tried to explain my reasoning, but it only made them attack harder. The next time I simply said, "I understand, but I don't agree," and stopped talking. They tried to argue more, asking why I didn't agree, but I didn't respond. I just stayed silent. They looked confused, said a few more things, then gave up. After that, they never tried to force their opinions on me again. Another time, it was a family member who insisted I was wrong about a personal decision. I said, "I understand, but I don't agree," and said nothing else. They didn't know what to do next, and from that moment on, they stopped criticizing me about that situation. The long-term value of this phrase is that it teaches narcissists that arguing with you doesn't pay off. You're not easily swayed, and you don't need their agreement to feel okay with yourself. They want to pull you in to prove they're right, but when you hold steady with "I understand, but I don't agree," you show them you're not someone they can control or change. Use this phrase consistently and you send a message that you're not playing their game, and eventually they give up because you don't give them any opening to continue their manipulation. You become someone they simply can't rattle, and that makes them lose interest in targeting you altogether. 5. I don't care about your opinion. This is one of the most powerful phrases you can use to shut down criticism or attacks from a narcissist because it strikes directly at their ego, the very thing they rely on to feel significant. Narcissists want you to be affected by their words. They want you to react so they can feel powerful. That's how they feed their false sense of superiority. But when you say, "I don't care about your opinion," you take that power away. You show them that what they think or say holds no weight in your world. The effectiveness of this phrase lies in how it completely severs the emotional dependency they try to create. You don't need their approval or disapproval to live your life, and that renders them powerless. I once dealt with someone who constantly criticized how I worked, saying I was too slow, not good enough, not doing things their way, clearly trying to make me feel inadequate and provoke a reaction. The first time I tried to explain that I had my own way of doing things, but it only fueled them more. The next time, I did something different. I looked them straight in the eye and said, "I don't care about your opinion," calmly, without flinching. They stopped immediately, stared at me in disbelief, and tried to say a few more things to reel me back in. I didn't respond. They walked away and never criticized me again. Another time, I used this phrase with someone who kept judging how I raised my child. I said, "I don't care about your opinion," and stayed silent. They looked uncomfortable, tried to keep talking, but when I didn't react, they stopped bringing it up altogether. The long-term value of "I don't care about your opinion" is that it makes it crystal clear the narcissist has no power over you. They need you to be affected in order to keep playing their game, but when you show them that you genuinely don't care, they lose their motivation to target you. They thrive on seeing you flinch, seeing you react, but when you stand firm and show them that their opinion means nothing to you, they realize there's no point in bothering you. Use this phrase consistently, and you become someone they can't influence, they give up, because you're no longer a source of attention or emotional fuel. You become untouchable to them, and that's what keeps them from ever coming back to harass you again. Words only have power when you use them, and now is the time to apply these phrases in real life. These aren't just ideas to hear and forget, they're practical tools for you to start using today in the moments when a narcissist tries to pull you into their world. Think about the situations where you face them, at work, in your family, in your personal relationships, and let's look at how these phrases work in action. At work, when someone criticizes you in front of others to make themselves look better, say, "I'll take that into consideration," and leave it at that. Don't explain, don't argue, just say the phrase and let them sit with it. I was once in a meeting where a colleague tried to embarrass me by pointing out a small mistake in front of everyone. I said, "I'll take that into consideration," looked at them briefly, and went right back to my work. They didn't know what to say next, and the conversation shifted. They realized I wasn't someone they could easily attack anymore. In family situations, when someone tries to pull you into an argument or place blame, say, "I'm not getting involved in this," and walk away. Don't let them drag you in. This phrase shows you're not willing to waste your time. I have a relative who always tries to stir up drama at gatherings. Once they started criticizing me and I said, "I'm not getting involved in this," and stepped outside. They were angry at first, but after a few times they stopped targeting me because I didn't give them the opportunity to keep it going. In personal relationships, when an ex tries to reach out to blame you or pull you back into their chaos, say, "I don't care," and cut off contact. This is how you end the story without giving them a chance to keep it going. I knew someone whose ex kept calling non-stop. She learned to say, "I don't care," and blocked his number. At first she was nervous, but later she felt relieved because she was no longer being pulled into his drama. Using these phrases might feel uncomfortable at first. You may worry they'll react badly or that you're being too harsh, but every time you speak up, you get stronger. I remember the first time I said no to a narcissist, I was a bit nervous, but I stayed silent afterward. They tried to say more, but when I didn't respond, they walked away. You don't have to get it perfect the first time, you just have to start, and it gets easier each time you do. When you use these phrases consistently, you'll notice the narcissist gradually pulling away. They don't change, but they realize you're no longer someone they can count on to keep their game going. They need your reactions, they need your attention, but when you stop giving it, they'll move on to someone else. You don't have to push them away, you just have to stand your ground and they'll walk away on their own. Narcissists seem powerful because they feed off your reactions, but when you say less, speak firmly, and stay silent afterward, you're not just protecting yourself, you're reclaiming control over your life. These phrases aren't about winning an argument, they're about breaking free from their control and living on your own terms. You don't need their agreement, you don't need them to change, you just need to know that you can stand up and protect yourself. Every time you say no, you're declaring that you have boundaries they can't cross. Every time you say, "I don't care," you're taking ownership of your emotions, they don't belong to them. Every time you stay silent after speaking, you're saying you don't owe anyone an explanation or justification. This is how you rebuild your inner strength, not to hurt them, but to protect your own peace. Try just one phrase today, just one, and see what changes. Try saying no when someone demands too much from you. Try saying, "I don't have time for this," when someone tries to drag you into an argument. Try saying, "I don't care about your opinion," when someone criticizes you. And then share your story with me in the comments. I want to know how it made you feel, what it gave you. You don't exist to please someone else or to live under their control. You have the right to stand up, to say what needs to be said, and to live the life you choose. No one can take that from you. Every word you speak is a step toward living in alignment with your true self, not with fear or doubt, but with the confidence that you are stronger than they ever imagined. This is your moment to take back control. Start now.